this leadership role that the Turks are seen trying to play, where does it fit into the debate about Sunnis and Shia during the Arab Spring, and what role, again, that creates for the relationship between Turkey and Iran?
Well, the Arab Spring was only in countries where there were Sunni regimes, except with the exception of Bahrain. And to Turkey's credit, Foreign Minister Davutoglu went to Bahrain in, I think it was March of 2011, and offered his help in mediating the conflict between the regime and the opposition that was clearly rising up in massive proportions and sort of diluting the whole Shiite nature of that. And he was rebuffed. He was basically sent shown the door, and he left the same day, as far as I remember, and that was it. So and that's the only other place in Iraq. There was no Arab Spring, except there were attempts, of course, but they didn't really go anywhere. And so the Sunni Shia thing didn't come up in that sense. But I think that because of the sectarian issue has been instrumentalized by regimes as a way or as a survival mechanism, it is now looking, especially in the Syrian case, which is the pivotal one, as if there is a Sunni alliance that is, in this case, fighting a minority regime which is not Shiite, but is, by Sunnis sometimes seen as Shia. Anyway, it's not Sunni. But anyway, that is also linked to Iran, and it becomes sort of a regional superpower kind of competition. And as I said earlier, in Baghdad, clearly among Shia Islamists, the perception is very much that this is what's happening, and that so now the issue is becoming sectarian, and Turkey is seen to be part of that. And I think that is a very negative and destructive dynamic, and that's what we need to get away from.
Yigal, the issue that was pointed to at the outset, which is that the Turks had at one time prided themselves on having a zero problem policy with the neighbors. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the vicinity, they have a problem with almost every single neighbor in their vicinity. Right. Does Israel lament that, or does it rejoice at it?
At the problems that Turkey is having? I mean, that's an interesting question.
But I mean, without being too flippant, I mean, does that undermine the position of Israel, or does it support it?
I think, like what I said, there's deep suspicion of Erdogan and Davutoglu in Israel. I think they're seen, and this, like I said, goes from the public, I think, up to leadership levels. I think they're seen as Islamists. Depending who you talk to, they could be of the radical kind. I don't think anyone would call them moderate anymore. I think the Mavi Marmara incident helped convince Israelis and that that Turkey has a Islamist agenda, that they're willing to use the relationship with Israel, willing to use Israel as a stepping stone. Use conflict with Israel as a stepping stone towards more leadership in the Middle East, and which to a certain extent they have. So I think in that sense, the idea that this policy of Turkey is sort of failing would be perceived by some Israelis as a sense of, well, look, these are the guys who sort of tried to start a fight with us, and look where they've ended up. That said, there's still the understanding there that Turkey is this emerging regional superpower, that it's, as opposed to all the other neighbors in the region, the stable one, and will likely remain stable with the exception of perhaps the Kurdish issue erupting again. So that having strong relations and normal relations with Turkey is a strategic priority.
But if you project, if I've been told to wrap up in about 5 minutes, but let me very quickly ask you this: if you look at what may happen down the road, if the Israelis and the Turks manage to mend fences between them, these problems that the Turks are having with the Syrians, with the Iranians and others, are those likely to impact Israeli interests in any way?
You know, what you have to remember, what brought Israel and Turkey together in the first place were problems with Syria that Turkey was having, you know, back in the 90s. You know, in a certain way, things, at least in the regional context, are kind of back to where they were. But I mean, I think things are very different between the two countries, and I think Turkey sees its role in the region very differently. And I think, like I said in my talk, I think the way they conceptualize foreign policy now, Israel, as long as it continues in its current policies vis-a-vis the Palestinians, falls, like I said, very much outside of their framework. So I think it's really hard to talk about this, you know, until there's movement on the Palestinian issue, and until Israel makes some serious strides. So in that sense, even, let's say, deteriorating situation with Syria, I don't see it right now bringing the two countries together again in some sort of strategic alliance, you know, to protect their borders or to you know. So I think for Turkey, the decision has really been made in many ways that without any movement on the Palestinian issue, without Israel changing its own policies, they see little room for a close or even normal relationship with it.
Robin, back to you. The issue that you raised, which is that many Arabs are looking at the Turkish model as a source of inspiration for their own political system. Obviously, with the ascent of Islamist parties such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt, we have an Islamist party sort of leading the government in Morocco. Islamists are on the rise in Jordan, Tunisia. Who knows? There are reports saying that if Bashar goes, the Muslim Brotherhood will play a very important role in that country. Does that, by definition, mean that the Turks will benefit from this new change in the region with all these Islamist movements on the rise?
Short term, yes. Who knows long term? I think we're such at that raw initial stage that you can't really tell. But when you look at the fact that in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya has elections in 2 weeks, and the Islamists are likely to do very well there. Yemen has elections in July, late July, and Islam, which has already been a part of the government, is likely to do very well. And Syria, those are just 6 of the 22 Arab countries, but they account for over half the Arab world's population. And you have Islamist parties that are likely to be either a plurality or a majority in each one, and that tells you, where they're headed. And when it comes to defining a new order, and when they look around, Turkey is one of the few that has done it. So I think Turkey does benefit not only in its own reputation and its influence in the rest of the world, because everyone will say, oh, well, the Turks are a model. We need to deal with some of these new governments through the Turks or with the help of the Turks or whatever, but also economically in terms it's likely, whether it's business, development, reconstruction in Libya where Turkey was already a major player. Who knows in Syria when it comes to reconstruction there, that there's potential for Turkey to be a big player in multiple ways in the next decade and become even a more influential power.
When you were out there speaking, I timed you very strictly. I'm going to do the same to myself and end this session. Thank you all very much. Robin, Yigal,